With new card sets come new abilities, and that's no different with Strixhaven. But the only thing different actually coming with this new set coming out the 15th to Magic: The Gathering Arena, and I think a week later for Physical Magic. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments below. But we actually are getting one change as well to the best of one format. And in today's video, we're discussing some of the new mechanics of Strixhaven and how these new mechanics actually do affect the best of one, best of one format as well. If you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, want to post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. But let's sit back and let's talk about the new mechanics. So the first new mechanic that you may have seen with Strixhaven, if you've seen any of the spoilers, I'll actually have a link for everything that you'll be seeing here in the video down in the description below. If you want to check out these articles for yourself and kind of get an idea and read the write-up that Magic: The Gathering has done on these cards. But the first ability here is we're getting this new ability called Learn. Essentially, it's one of those things that are being tied on to particular spells in the set as a whole. And essentially, it's an ability that you may reveal a lesson card you own from outside the game. You have to put it into your hand. That's one option you can do. The second option is you can discard a card and draw a card. It's another option. And the third option is you can actually just do nothing. So if you don't actually want to go to your sideboard, you don't want to draw a card because maybe you don't want to discard a card that you may want to hold on to, you can actually sit there and not do anything. And this is actually fairly interesting because the next card that you get from this are these lesson cards. Essentially, these lesson cards have some sort of stagnant ability. I think there's only like 5 of them. I could be mistaken, but I looked at the spoilers and that's all I saw. And they're all fairly interesting. I think most of them are just sorceries. They're not as super impactful, but they do have some sort of, decent mechanic to it. But, it depends on what kind of style of deck you're doing. But this one, for example, is put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature. It gains vigilance at end of turn. So just a little way to buff your creature, make sure it doesn't untap or tap for when it attacks. But overall, it's a decent ability. Now, with that being said, this is actually where I guess Wizards at some point took a look at this and they kind of understood that if there's more people playing these cards, they're going to be accessing the sideboards. They don't want people stacking their sideboards full of cards. And if we go over to the State of the Game article that they actually just released, I think just today or the other day, we're actually going to be seeing one major change actually happen for Best of One Magic. And that actually is that they're actually going to be separating your sideboard down to 7 cards for Best of One. And if you play Best of 3, you can still have access to all 5 cards, so it's not going to affect you in, if you're playing Best of 3 Magic. But this is actually fairly interesting. I guess their idea here is that they don't want you to actually, stack your, sideboard full of these lesson cards to gain, X amount of extra abilities and stuff like that. Just, I guess, keep it balanced. And this is actually the first change we've seen Wizards do to actually balance the game around Best of One. And I think this is actually a decent change. Because typically beforehand, most people in Best of One really only use their sideboards if they played some sort of wish board. And to limit people from actually having 15 cards that can counter, any particular deck in the meta as a whole is definitely, a step, I think, in the right direction, just because it makes things like Fate Wish is not as effective, because it's going to limit what you can actually pick out. You can't put, X amount of copies of things that kind of counter most of the meta decks in a whole. In Best of 3, like I said, it's not going to affect in any way. And I guess they just didn't want people to kind of continue to abuse the sideboard in Best of One. In doing so, add in a whole bunch of lessons, because like I said, you can add in X amount of copies of each lesson, and then that's probably where it gets a little ridiculous. And they just kind of saw that as not a fun gameplay mechanic. The other thing too is, as well, is if you play companions currently, companions actually take 1 slot of your sideboard. So essentially, if you're playing a deck that plays like Lurrus or something like that, if you're playing rogues, you'd actually only have access to 6 more cards in your sideboard. So that's actually another thing. And like I said, in doing so, it does limit what you can do with your sideboard. And as you can kind of see here, they actually, you can actually stack it in a way that however you sort your sideboard will be the cards that you put in your Best of One and in your Best of 3. Now moving on to the next ability in Strixhaven, and that is going to be the ability called Magecraft. Magecraft is this ability that whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it does this. In the particular example we see here, Eager First Year is a 2-mana 2/2 with Magecraft, and whenever we cast or copy a spell or instant or sorcery spell, you're going to get +1/+0 until end of turn. Definitely a decent way to kind of bump up a creature, a little bit extra. And that just means that there's going to be some ways to copy your creatures in the meta as a whole. Now, showing you a different card from this article that they're showing the abilities is whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Definitely another interesting card here. I mean, sure, this example is kind of not the greatest because it's a 4-mana 2/2, which is definitely not a super strong card, just because that is one decent ability, but it's a very weak power and toughness. I feel like if it was at least a 2/3, that's a different story. But I'm not talking about breaking down the card, but that is Magecraft ability. You're going to do some sort of thing when you cast an instant or sorcery spell to then trigger this ability. It's kind of like prowess in a way on certain cards, and it's kind of like other triggers in a way on other cards. So it's one of those things that, depending on what style of deck you are playing, it can definitely affect what your deck plays overall. And now the last ability actually that really is new with Strixhaven is going to be the ability called Ward. Ward is this new ability that, you know, whenever this creature becomes a target or a spell or ability an opponent controls, it does X. Your opponent has to do X in order to actually, you know, do whatever it is they want to do. This one in particular, they have to pay 2 additional mana to actually, you know, counter or their spell gets countered. So they would have to pay, you know, like an eliminate or something like that. They would have to pay 4 mana instead of 2, which is definitely a good way to kind of tax your opponent for trying to eliminate your creatures or single target your creatures down, which is definitely an interesting spin on, you know, other abilities as well. So it's definitely one of those interesting things. And here we have another example of another card that has Ward. This one is a 5 mana 3/3, flying, and has Ward and pay 3 life. So essentially, if your opponent wants to target this creature with a removal spell, they'll have to pay actually 3 life in order to do so. Definitely another interesting you know, take on this Ward ability. And I could see, you know, a whole array of cards having various things that your opponent has to do. I think a lot of, depending on what school or color they're from, will have various abilities. You know, maybe like because it's white black, maybe that's why they have to pay 3 life. If it's red, maybe your opponent has to take, you know, X amount of damage in some sort of way, or deal damage to target creature. I don't really know. I haven't, like I said, really looked at the spoilers as well, because I kind of want to be surprised when I start opening packs when the set comes out. But that being said, Ward is definitely going to turn out to be kind of an interesting ability to have creatures that have this extra tax on them that your opponent has to deal with in order to target them. Now, the next ability that isn't anything new is actually this modal double face cards. And I guess, you know, Wizards really enjoyed how modal face cards have worked so far in the format, because it kind of gives your cards particular multi-uses depending on the situation. And they're bringing back modal double face cards. And I think the ones that we have is that they're going to be, you know, a lot of these cards are going to be focused on the Dean of a particular color. This one in particular is a white-red Dean. Essentially, the white version is other tap creatures you control get +1/+0. So whenever you're attacking, you have to tap creatures down. They're going to get +1/+0 when they're tapped and attacking. Other untapped creatures you control get +1/0 or +0/+1. So whenever they're, you know, you have them on defense, they're going to have a little extra toughness, maybe to, you know, prevent an incoming attack. And then whenever you attack, you untap each creature you control. So essentially, you untap everything you're attacking with, and then tap any number of creatures you control. So I guess you can choose which ones you keep tap and which ones you keep untap, which is definitely an interesting ability, and it's gonna be one of those things to kind of see how that plays out. And I do actually think it's a pretty decent ability. This creature itself is a 1/3, so it's not anything too aggressive in a way, but I do think I can see how this actually will help you out in a way, depending on what style of deck you are playing. Now we look at the other side of the deck, and it's Plarg, Dean of Chaos. It's a red Dean. Essentially here, we're going to discard a card, draw a card by tapping it. We pay 5 mana, reveal cards from top of our library into reveal a non-legendary, non-land card with mana cost. Our mana value, I guess is what they're saying, now is with 3 or less, and we can actually cast that card without paying its mana cost, which is definitely very good. We put the real cards not cast this way on the bottom of our library in any order. So essentially, we can pay 5 mana and pay any and search and look through the top X amount of cards of our library until we get to a particular card. Definitely a very interesting thing here. It's definitely cool to see that they kind of are keeping the total thing around, as being one of those things that has gone through multiple sets and they haven't really dropped it. Sure, they've kind of done different things in each iteration of it, and I'm sure if we look at the spoilers, I'm sure we can kind of see other ways that they've done modal cards. With that being said, guys, I mean, these are like 3 main mechanics that are coming out of Call Time. The one big change to the sideboards in Best of 1. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Is there anything that sticks out to you? Like I said, there'll be spoilers if you want to take a look at all the cards in the set as a whole and kind of, you know, pick out which ones you like, which ones you may not like as much. Let me know which card may be your favorite coming from the set. If you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, want to know what's new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.